Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking some absolutely fascinating research by Choi Won-Rye. We're going to explore how a deeply rooted Eastern philosophy might actually hold the structural cure for the broken parts of our Western economic system. It's a wild concept, so let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Have you ever felt like our modern economy is, well, less about hard work and more like a giant casino? You're definitely not alone. A lot of us feel like we're just rolling the dice, hoping for a lucky break in a system that feels incredibly linear, stressful, and honestly, pretty broken.
Here's our roadmap for the Explainer today. We'll start with the modern economic crisis, then look at restoring our economic motivation, regenerating broken economic ethics, harmonizing clashing economic ideologies, overcoming the environmental crisis, and finally, the cyclic path forward.
Part 1. The Modern Economic Crisis.
Before we can even talk about a cure, we have to properly diagnose the disease, right? Our current system is facing four massive structural problems. First up, gambling capitalism. That's where we've totally lost our true motivation to work and just rely on chance. Second is ethical nihilism, where people fulfill their daily obligations but feel zero real connection to justice. Third, utilitarian inequality. This is the whole idea of crushing minorities for the sake of the greater good. And fourth, environmental collapse. We've got this splendid material growth, but it's literally destroying the natural world in the process. The research points out that ideologies like libertarianism and utilitarianism actually mutated into these massive problems because of one missing ingredient. They lack cyclicity, basically a closed loop of cause and effect.
Which brings us to Part 2, restoring our economic motivation.
So modern libertarianism inadvertently created this sort of lottery capitalism that completely stripped away our motivation to work and expand our freedom. So how do we get that spark back? Well, the answer lies in our first pillar, a concept called Yumyang Hapduk. This translates to the union of yin and yang virtue. Think of this as a total structural hack to restore balance in the market. In traditional terms, it's the principle of reversing fire, which represents material gain, and water, which represents ethics. By placing water, ethics, above fire, material gain, we restore balance and actually trigger an automatic circulation of wealth. It's like flipping the whole system on its head.
And this brilliantly illustrates the contrast between the two approaches. Western libertarianism tends to prioritize material gain over ethics, looking at wealth purely as a product of personal ability. Basically, you wait to receive. But the Daesun view, deistic libertarianism, prioritizes ethics over material gain. It runs on what's called needism, where your ability is exercised directly for the needs of others. It's a profound shift. You go from waiting to receive to giving first.
Structurally, when you're dealing with the abuse of freedom and a pure focus on gain, the solution is that union of yin and yang, which naturally puts ethics first. If education is just being used as a selfish tool to grab a salary, the fix is literally just changing the order. You give first, and then you receive. The incredible result here? Economics transforms into the study of making others prosper. By giving first, you structurally stimulate cyclic wealth that eventually comes right back to you.
Part 3. Regenerating broken economic ethics. Now we really need to talk about how our modern sense of justice has kind of devolved into this ethical nihilism, where folks are just quietly compromising with injustice day in and day out. This brings us to our second pillar, Sinyin Jowa, or the harmony between spirits and humans. You can think of this as a massive cosmic feedback loop. Imagine a giant domino effect. Every single action you take, even those totally invisible, private, ethical ones, grows and inevitably cycles right back to you. Literally nothing is ever lost in the void. There is a really beautiful quote from the source text, the Zhengyang, that hits the nail on the head here. If you go to a marketplace or an assembly and merely think, if they believe my words, a path to survival will open for them, though they may not know it, their divine spirits will know it, and the virtue will return to you. This highlights something absolutely crucial. A complex, rigorous distribution network exists out there, tracking everything, even if we can't physically see it. The sheer logic behind this is just fascinating. The modern problem of having zero accountability and poor communication is essentially solved by this rigorous spiritual distribution network. Instead of a basic output equals input system, we are dealing with eternal return and highly complex system dynamics. And the ultimate starting point for this healthy, complex economy to actually work? It's a concept called muchuk, which means starting with zero resentment. If you kick off your economic interactions with absolutely no resentment, the system cycles perfectly in your favor.
Moving on to Part 4, harmonizing clashing economic ideologies.
We hear about Western utilitarianism all the time, right? The greatest good for the greatest number. But, as we've all seen, it often creates massive, glaring gaps between the rich and the poor. Now, what's really interesting about this next concept is how it unpacks that exact paradox. It's our third pillar, Haewin Sang Sing, the resolution of grievances for mutual benefit. It argues that the true public good can only be achieved by resolving the grievances of the minority first. Ignoring the minority doesn't just hurt them, it literally blocks the entire structural system from functioning.
To really underscore just how serious this is, the text tells us, even if a single person harbors resentment, the energy of heaven and earth becomes blocked. That is a seriously powerful indictment of the overlord tactics we see so much today, where people justify sacrificing the few just to benefit the many. It just plain doesn't work.
Let's take an objective look at these two approaches side by side. Utilitarian overlord tactics essentially sacrifice the few, leaning heavily on external ideological justification while actually breaking down internal market efficiency. On the flip side, Daesun's sage tactics demand that we resolve those minority grievances right off the bat. By harmonizing the powerful and the powerless, it focuses completely on internal efficiency. Basically, it's telling us we have to fix the harm done to the little guy before we can ever expect to enjoy true sustainable innovation.
To quickly summarize how this shifts things structurally, when your problem is a disregard for minorities and forced uniformity, the solution is prioritizing resolution over blind innovation. Labor becomes based on actual need, rather than just pure ability or output. It brings clashing systems together by fostering loyalty and mutual benefit, which completely changes how our economic ideologies function, all without leaving anyone behind.
Part 5. Overcoming the environmental crisis.
Look, communitarianism and Western capitalism have for sure created some incredible material wealth, but they've also left our environment and our human communities in an absolute state of crisis. And that brings us to our final pillar, Doton Jinyong, the perfection of Tao. This describes a cyclical interaction where communities and nature push back and ultimately harmonize when the shared will of the weak majority is respected. Goods, resources, and nature itself have their own inherent trending cyclicity that you simply cannot ignore or override with human greed.
The source material shares this brilliant little micro-narrative to illustrate this, called the tavern owner's mistake. So, this guy named Sin Kang Young earned all his wealth from the local youths, but when those same youths fell into poverty, he turned his back and treated them coldly. And what do you think happened? The community energy shifted in a heartbeat and they actually smashed his tavern. Harmony had to be restored. It perfectly shows what happens when community balance is broken and just how violently and quickly the system will correct itself.
So the crucial structural takeaway here is this. When you're dealing with powerful minorities ignoring the weak, or people just free-riding within a system, the solution relies entirely on the trending cyclicity of goods in nature. By keeping community checks on the powerful, goods are practically forced to circulate in a way that helps everybody. Donating and circulating wealth isn't just a nice thing to do, it's the exact structural mechanism that keeps the community and the environment from totally collapsing.
And finally, Part 6, the cyclic path forward.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the 4 diseases and applied the 4 pillars. If we synthesize all this into one unified, actionable takeaway, it really boils down to 3 steps. 1. Shift the order. Give to the community first before you ever expect to receive. 2. Resolve grievances. Fix the harm done to the minority before seeking out any broader public good. And 3. Trust the cycle. Just watch as ethical wealth circulates right back to you. The amazing part is that Daesun thought isn't telling us to completely abandon capitalism. It's just asking us to hack it by shifting the order of our actions to create a healthy, closed loop.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. What if changing the simple order of how we give and receive could permanently fix capitalism? It's a massive idea. Take a second to ponder how injecting a little cyclical thinking could completely change your own economic reality. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.